Chattanooga wouldn't be your territory.
So I went there, and he interviewed me and so on, and it was all, of course, perfunctory. He was just going through the motions, stalling. Finally, I got in. And so now I go in, it's August of '72. I go in, and I have the two documents in front of me, as well as all the materials. I got Jackie Kennedy's so-called gift, April '64. I got the inventory of October '65. I'm sorry, '65 and '66, I'm sorry. And I'm looking, and guess what? In the October inventory, several things are missing. Some x-rays, some photographs, and a large metal box in which the brain had been contained in formalin. Formalin is a fixative solution that we use to keep tissues from disintegrating, from becoming necrotic. And so that Sunday, August 27th, 1972, page 1, New York Times, Fred Graham, of course, had the exclusive. President's brain missing, look it up. And to this day, here we are, so what that's 28, and in 15 is 43. 43 and a half years later, the brain is still unaccounted for. What do the Warren Commission sycophants, defenders, apologists, and the people that just love to attack Warren Commission research critics in different ways? How do they handle us? Oh, the Kennedys took it, the Kennedys did this, the Kennedys did that. The last thing in the world, the Kennedys, when it came to autopsies and things of a medical nature, they weren't interested in any of that stuff, and so on. And with the whole world talking about the brain and so on, if they wanted to take the brain and bury it, they would have. And why would they have kept the brain around for a while? If they were going to take the brain, they would have taken it back then. You fix formalin. When you have a brain that you want to examine, understand a brain in the fresh state is as much a thick, viscous liquid as it is a firm, solid substance. I don't want to get too ghoulish or so on, but you cut a fresh brain and it doesn't fall apart, but it's hard to examine structures. So when you have a brain and you are looking for the trajectory of a bullet through the brain, other kinds of conditions too, but let's talk about bullet trajectories. What you do is you take the brain and you put it in formalin for 2 weeks, a little bit more. And now, and I do not mean to be the least bit crude, but for you to understand it, cutting a fresh brain would be like you're making a salad, and you take a soft-boiled egg and you cut it, and you're going to get crumpled pieces. If you fix it in formalin, that brain assumes the consistency of a hard-boiled egg, and now you slice it, and you have firm, identifiable slices.
Even that's like Sarah Palin's brain would even get hard under those circumstances?
I'm not so sure about that.
Okay.
The point I wish to make is that the Kennedys they went back 2 weeks later. The brain was fixed. December 6, 1963, the brain was fixed. They went back. Look at the Warren Commission report. And here is the exact quote. Serial sections of the brain, parallel sections like this, serial sections of the brain are not made in order to preserve the specimen. Those are the exact words. Right? If the Kennedy family wanted to take the brain and bury it, it was their right, obviously. Nobody's going to challenge them. They did not. The brain is still around then, in April of '65. Then all of a sudden, between April '65 and October '66, Bobby Kennedy or somebody decides, oh my God, we can't allow the brain to be around anymore. It's total nonsense. The brain was taken. Why? Because if you examine the brain, you'll see that there were 2 shots that struck the president in the head in synchronized fashion. One from the rear and one from the right front, behind the picket fence, the grassy knoll. That's why the brain is missing, because the trajectories would prove indisputably, unequivocally, that you had 2 shooters. When you got 2 shooters, you got a conspiracy. When you got a conspiracy, now you got to go and reopen the case and deal with it. And, you know, and that's.
And Bobby Kennedy also reportedly, had he been elected president in '68, was thinking of
Exactly.
reopening the.
Bobby Kennedy was quoted absolutely. Look at the wonderful book Brothers, written by David Talbot, and you say Bobby Kennedy said, yeah, that he. Remember, people say, gee, why did he do something back then, and so on. First of all, you know, the grief, the trauma. You can imagine, you know, people in this audience have lost loved ones. I've lost my parents, and so on. You know how you feel, and so on. And then on top of that, politically, the moment that Kennedy was assassinated, that was the last time, I believe, that J. Edgar Hoover ever communicated with Bobby Kennedy, even in the remaining days of his being Attorney General. And then when he came back later on. That was the end of Bobby Kennedy's political clout. Hoover and he were bitter, bitter enemies. And while the bitterness was not as deep-seated with Lyndon Johnson, it was there. The political enmity and so on. So Bobby Kennedy was in no position to do a goddamn thing. A private researcher would have had more success in pushing for things than Bobby Kennedy would have had back then. So when people say, well, why did he? But let us stick with the brain. The point is that is the missing brain. So I pointed that out in 1972, and that brain, I haven't any idea where it is.
Can never whistle that. So, rogue elements of the CIA, either in the CIA at the time or
Go back to who's responsible.
Sure.
Okay, so I said Chinese and Russians and Cubans, forget them. And mafioso Carlos Marcello was going to be deported. Bobby Kennedy already had the deportation papers in order. He was being sent back to Honduras. I think it was Honduras. It was a Central American country, I'm pretty sure. And that was it. He had never acquired citizenship. He had brothers. I think he had 3 or 4 brothers. They all had gone on to become citizens. I don't know. In his supreme arrogance, he never bothered. So he was on his way out. And he talked about the Kennedys and eliminating the Kennedys and so on many times. But who had the knowledge? Who had the power? Who had the ability to see to it that all of this would be covered up? The mafia. Mafia wouldn't dare. And again, where are they going by themselves once they're out there openly? Think they're going to get away with it? No way. You got to look and see. You got to read the whole history of Allen Dulles and the CIA.
right. And you pointed this out many times. JFK had fired him,
Yeah.
and then suddenly he lobbied to be on the Warren Commission.
So there's an incredible paradox, which is absolutely inexplicable. It is so absurd that a novelist would be ashamed to put it into a novel in order to fulfill the plot requirements. That Allen Dulles, who, as John just said, was fired as a CIA director by Kennedy, he was he was up the proverbial creek without an oar. Kennedy, that Bay of Pigs fiasco, and so on. Kennedy replaced him, and Kennedy, CIA Senator Mike Mansfield, then majority leader, was in the office. This is a documented scene when Kennedy finds out about what the CIA had done with the Bay of Pigs, and there were other things on the plate too, in Vietnam and Guatemala. The CIA did whatever the hell they wanted to do. They were their own government. Arbenz in Guatemala, Allende in Chile, the Diem brothers in Vietnam. Anybody that the CIA felt should be eliminated, they just went ahead and did it. That's not an overstatement, okay? So Kennedy had a memorandum of some kind. He tore it up into pieces like we take a piece of paper and threw it into the air and said, "This is what I intend to do to the CIA." So now Kennedy's dead. Special commission is appointed. And who was appointed to the commission? Allen Dulles. Who has the highest attendance record at the commission? By far, more than double anybody else? Allen Dulles. Chief Justice Warren, he wasn't there very much.
So was the Chief Justice?
Two U.S. senators, Russell from Georgia, and then the two Congressmen Ford and our Louisiana congressman, and they were busy. They were busy doing things. Allen Dulles essentially ran the Warren Commission.
So, we don't know this for sure, but was Earl Warren inexplicably using bad judgment to appoint Allen Dulles, or would he have been in on the conspiracy?
I don't think that was his appointment.
Oh, okay.
No, just because he was the chairman. He
Doesn't
didn't
mean-
want to be chairman.
He didn't want to do it at all.
No,
so
Lyndon
Right, LBJ
Johnson,
twisted his
Johnson, as only Lyndon Johnson was capable of twisting someone's arm around their back, figuratively. He reached out, and I can understand. You get the Chief Justice of America. I can understand that. But no, Warren did not appoint. No, Johnson, with advice from whomever, appointed the members of the commission.
So Dulles was mad that he'd been fired, that the CIA was troubled, that they might be dismantled under Kennedy, and correct me if I'm wrong, they also thought he wasn't tough enough on the Soviet Union.
Yeah,
and-
sure. It's not just a singular event or even a few events, but exactly, it's the whole political philosophy. We're not going to do this in the world anymore. We're not just going to go around and kill leaders wherever we think they would foment revolutions. We're not going to do that anymore. I'm not saying it's going to happen overnight. I'm not making Kennedy into being, omnipotent, omniscient, and the greatest single person that ever lived. But I'm just saying it was going to be a different ball game. There's going to be a new ball game. Even Eisenhower had warned us about the military-industrial complex. Remember that? Dwight D. Eisenhower warned Americans about the military-industrial complex. That came from Dwight Eisenhower, a supreme military commander and a Republican, okay? And now you've got Kennedy in place. So you're not looking at something, well, gee, this policy today or wait until next year. And remember this, and again, I don't say this in a partisan political fashion. I'm just saying it as a matter of fact. Like, we're at the Oak Theater. We're not at downtown Pittsburgh. We're at the Oak Theater. And this is a fact. Think about it. There were no way in the world you were going to get rid of John Kennedy at the polls. You see, Lyndon Johnson wiped out Barry Goldwater in '64. Goldwater, did he carry one state? I mean, there's no way. So now they're looking at 5 more years. This is not, wait it out. Boy, the 9th inning of the baseball game, the 3rd period of the hockey game, the 2nd half of the basketball game. You're looking at 5 years, and guess who follows for 8 more years after that? Who follows Bobby? Who follows Jack? I just told you. He had too much to drink. Bobby. So they're looking at 13 years, John. They're looking at 13 years. 5 of Jack and 8 of Bobby. You sit back and say, 13 years? That's a lifetime in the political development of a nation. It's a lifetime. You move this way, you move that way. Okay? Well, how do you get rid of somebody like that? You're going to beat him at the polls? J. Edgar Hoover couldn't do it. He tried. Couldn't do that. He even tried with Martin Luther King, which is another assassination to talk about if you wanted to. Again, whatever anybody, we're not going to review everybody's policies, political philosophies, et cetera, et cetera. The point I'm simply making is that haven't been many people who have been around that I can think of that who would say something, establish a policy, and 100 million Americans just automatically fall in line. And that's the way it was with John Kennedy, and then the way it was going to be with Bobby Kennedy, who had the nomination sewed up after he won the primary in California the night of his assassination on June 5th and the June 6th of 1968. And that's the way it was with Martin Luther King. J. Edgar Hoover tried like hell to destroy Martin Luther King, coming up with affairs with women and all that jazz, and he didn't succeed. How do you deal with people like that? You say, well, it's a democracy. We'll wait and we'll vote and we'll show the people. Bullshit. There's only one way. There's only one way, baby, and that is to physically destroy, to eliminate. That's what those 3 assassinations were about, because there was no other way to have accomplished the goal of quieting them other than to eliminate them physically, to destroy them, to kill them.
Is the single bullet theory you've always thought was ridiculous. And if you want to expound upon that, please do. But you did have Arlen Specter on the 40th anniversary investigation that you did. And I watched him, he looked like he believed his own bullshit. I don't know if he's just a good actor, and God rest his soul, he's no longer with us. He was a staff member of the War Commission, as you may know, when he's essentially concocted the single bullet theory.
He was junior legal counsel. He wasn't yet in the U.S. Senate. And he came up with the single bullet theory. The basis for the single bullet theory, very simply, is this. They had 2 chronologies that just did not fit. They had the Zapruder film, and I had the opportunity to examine the original Zapruder film at Life magazine headquarters in New York City back in December of '65. And that camera, an 8mm Bell Howell camera, was examined by the FBI and by the Bell Howell people, and it was determined that 18.3 frames of the film strip moved through the camera per second. Remember, people who are over 50, remember when we were in high school, you took the spool of film and you threaded it through on the inside, the camera that opened up, okay? Each one of those little things is a frame, a little 8mm, okay? And so they took the camera, tested it, and determined 18.3 frames moved through the camera per second. So what Life magazine, who purchased the Zapruder film for $200,000, what they did is what the Warren Commission had done too. They blew up each one of these little 8mm pictures into an 11 by 15 photo. And there I was at Life magazine headquarters in New York City, going around tables set up like X-ray view boxes, facing up in serpentine fashion, and you study the assassination of John Kennedy and the wounding of John Connally at 1/18th second intervals. There's not a word you can utter, there's not a thought you can entertain, there's not a movement you can make 18 times in 1 second. You can study the murder of John Kennedy at 1/18th second intervals. So they see Kennedy is hit, and then John Connally, 1.5 seconds is hit after that. Okay? Now, the next chronometer is the murder weapon. This is a Mannlicher Carcano, non-automatic carbine, developed in Italy, going into World War II. Considered by every long gun expert, you talk to people that know their long guns, the most inferior weapon of its genre. And I can tell you a little story about that, a true story. I was in Italy. I had done a medical legal seminar there in 1965 with the Institute of Legal Medicine in Rome, and they wanted me back in 1972. And I went back in 72, and this stuff had broken, and I was very deeply involved with my comments and criticisms and so on, and they wanted me to speak on the Kennedy assassination. So I was talking, and I got into the single bullet theory, and I was discussing that in the Mannlicher Carcano, and I saw some of the distinguished professors in the back looking at each other and kind of snickering and so on. I felt so terrible. I was still a relatively young guy. These were people whom I had met years before, respected, wonderful individuals, distinguished professors. And so when it was over, I went up to the new young director, Silvio Merli. We had become good friends, and he spoke English. I said, Silvio, I feel so bad. Did I say something that was inappropriate or whatever? He said, no, you don't understand. He says, in Italy, he says, the Mannlicher Carcano is considered to be an instrument of love, not a weapon of war. I'll never forget that. So anyway, so now they wanted to see this. I'm telling you, it's incredible. And the telescopic sight was off kilter. These are all facts. Look them up. I'm not telling you anything. If I engage in conjecture, I'll tell you. You want to tell you a fact? It's fact. A defective scope on this piece of crap weapon, and they want to get how fast can somebody shoot, unload, reload, and shoot again. That's not allowing for repositioning, re-aiming at a moving target. The car is moving. It's not speeding, but it's moving. And then there's tree branches that sporadically block your view from that southeast corner of the Texas School Book Depository building, okay? But